What is up, everybody? I am Alex from Level Up Plus VFX, and welcome back to Alex's Demystified Nuke Compositing Guide. In our last episode, we started talking about direct keys. In particular, we went over Luma keys. In this episode, we get to do the fun stuff. Green screens. Green screens are a VFX staple and personally are one of my favorite types of shots to do. But there are many ways to skin the proverbial green screen cat. From the ultra basic one node workflows of just dropping in a key light and calling it a day, to the overly complex workflows you'd probably find in a studio. Today I'll be showing you the exact method that I wish I had been shown when I first started learning Nuke. It's a workflow that isn't too complicated but also isn't too basic, and it's guaranteed to produce consistent results every time. And I am so excited to explain it every step of the way for you right now. As always, I have links to the footage and elements I'll be using in this lesson down below in the description, so go ahead and grab them for free and let's hop right into Nuke. Alright, here we are in Nuke, and I've read in my footage and my background plate that I'm going to be using today. As a reminder, you can pick those up in the description. The only difference will be yours will be in 1080p instead of being in 4K. The very first thing we're going to notice is that this is in a very flat color space. We want to switch this over from whatever raw color space this is to Blackmagic Generation 5, which comes in Nuke when you read in Blackmagic footage. If you go over to Input Transform, you can switch it right here, and you'll be all set. Alternatively, if you want to, you can leave it raw just as it is and drop down an OCIO color space node and set the top one here to Film Generation V5. Both of these do the exact same thing, so it really is up to personal preference. Personally, I'm going to use this OCIO color space node for now, but you can do whatever you want. Now that my color space is set properly on my green screen character, I also want to adjust my project settings in order to match my footage. If we double click on our footage node here, we'll see our original frame range is 1001 to 1061. So hitting S in the node graph and setting that over here, just like we talked about in lesson 1, should be perfect. We can also see that our resolution is UHD 4K, so I'm going to set this over here as well. And if we go back to our read node and look into the metadata tab, if we scroll down, we should be able to find the frame rate of our footage, 23.976. So S on my keyboard, and I'm going to set this to 23.976. I'm going to go over here, drop down to visible and hit global, and it's going to update my input and output frames. I'm just going to set those like this, and we should be good to go to start our keying workflow. Now, there are 5 sections to this green screen workflow. There's the Despill section, there's the core key, there's the edge key, there's our comp for our color on our background plate, and finally, we're going to bring it all together. Let's start with the Despill. If we hit tab and start typing Despill here, we'll see all our different options. There are tons. Personally, one of my favorite is Despill to color. However, AP Despill is a very popular one, as well as Despill Madness. And once we've added this Despill to color node, we can start setting up our Despill. It's super straightforward. In this screen color option, we're going to go ahead and click on our color picker here, control click on our screen, and suddenly we've despilled our background. Now, something worth noting is, believe it or not, even though it might not look like there is any in the plate, there is grain here, and we're seeing it pretty strongly now that we've despilled it. I normally use a paid plugin called Neat Video Denoise. However, because I know not everyone can afford to pay for a plugin, especially if they're just starting up Nuke and are not sure if they want to invest in something like that, well, I'm going to use the denoise node that's built into Nuke today. If we go ahead and drop that into our screen, we'll see we get this little analysis region that we can move around. Place this over my green screen where I saw the noise, and luckily in this shot, it's actually doing a great job of denoising our footage. Now, right now, as we set up our Despill, this isn't as important, and it's just going to kind of slow down our comp a little bit, so I'm going to hit D on my keyboard with the node to disable it, and then we'll re-enable it later when we create our key. Now, there's one last thing I want to do in this Despill section before we move on to the next, and that's create a luminance match. If our background was to be brighter than what our background in this actual plate is, that being the green screen here, we would actually find ourselves having a black edge around our character where the green screen meets his shoulder, for example, or this white edge of his head. The easiest way to fix this is with a luminance match setup, and they're very easy to set up. We'll start by adding a merge node and switching it over to minus, and then we'll do the original footage minus our Despill. If we look through it, we kind of get the opposite of what a key would do, where we get a direct key of this green screen here. Dropping down a saturation node, we can then desaturate this, and now we just have the luminance levels of this background screen. If we then do a merge and do plus over our original background, like so, we are now matching the luminance level of this key. And actually down here in the bottom right hand corner, we can actually see this L, which stands for luminance value of our background. If we go back and forth between the two, we can see it stays at 0.24 for both parts. The great thing about this is you can then just drop down something like a grade node and start playing with the multiply to brighten up this background. However, you can't bring it any darker than our original Despill. With that all done though, we are set up with our Despill. It really was that simple. Let's go ahead and do a period here to add one little out point for this quick setup. Hold Control to add another block here, and we'll select everything, hit Tab and type in backdrop, and we can just create this little section and we can call it Despill. Now typically for a core key, we would use Primat. However, I know the non-commercial version of Nuke doesn't include Primat, so you can also use Keylight, and that's what we're going to use today. I'm going to drop down a Keylight node here, and we're going to plug our source into our footage. And this is where having our denoise on will help us. So looking through this Keylight node now, we'll see nothing changes. That is because we need to select our screen color. I'll do Control click on that to get it. And we'll see we already, if we go into the alpha channel, are getting a pretty solid key, but it could be a little bit better. If we do Control and Shift and drag on our screen, we can sample a larger area. I know it's going to glitch out a little bit, but once we get to a point that looks somewhat like this, I think I'm pretty happy. And now we just need to mess with our settings a bit to dial it in. Because this is a core key and I don't really care about our edges, just increase the screen gain until our background is completely black like this, and then we can maybe mess with the balance a little bit to push it in a little bit further. Now the name of the game for a core key, of course, is to make sure there are no holes in your core. You want nothing transparent, and as we can see on the front of our face here, we can see some transparent areas. So I'm going to go over to the screen matte option, and I'm going to pull down the clip white until our character is completely white. And for us, I think it's going to be around here at around 0.45. I'm not seeing any white pixels anymore. If I gamma down, can I see anything? We have a black pixel there. Let's see if we can pull it down a little bit farther, and there it goes. And I think that is perfect for our use case today. Now the reason we separate our core key from our edge key, of course, is because especially in comps like this one where we have some transparent edges, we want to make sure we're getting everything solid in the middle, but our transparent edges remain transparent like they're supposed to. So we're actually going to try and get rid of these transparent edges by doing a bit of an erode and make sure we're just getting the core of our character. Drop down an erode node first, and that's going to be the erode blur filter. Now looking through this erode node, we can see that we're actually going to the negatives by default, which is going to expand our erode. We actually want to do the opposite. We want to shrink it inwards until we've gotten rid of that mud flap. Once we're far enough in, we can go ahead and drop down a blur node. I prefer to use the blur node over this erode blur node. This one for me has been a little bit weird, so I prefer to blur it afterwards. So I'm going to go ahead and blur it up a bit, and then we'll tweak that later. Add a merge node, and A will be a mask of B. Now the purpose of adding this mask here is to make sure that we have a soft fall off from our core to the edge of our matte. We don't want this fall off going past our actual character, of course. We just want it blurring from like the center over here out to the edge. And if we look through it and go into the alpha channel again, we can see we actually have values still on the edge. We don't want that. We want these to be softly rolling off to the center. So we're going to play with our blurred node a little bit more until we get that soft fall off. So right around here feels good where we're getting that, and see we're like bumping up against the edge as we go farther. So I think something right around there is good, but I'm also noticing that we get this like sharp corner here, which I think is on the side of the helmet. We can start playing with the screen dilate in the screen matte settings node here, and that'll just dilate the whole matte in a little bit more. And again, we get that soft fall off. We can then push it out a little bit more perhaps, maybe not much, maybe we're already kind of right on the money. So I'm going to say a size of around 14. seems to be pretty solid. And that is our core key. Drop down a period again, and we'll save this for later. We'll highlight it, press tab, add a backdrop, and we'll call this core key. Now let's go ahead and do our edge key. Quickly, I need to shout out the guy who has made this method. That's Compositing Mentor over on YouTube. He taught me this method, and it's called the IBK Stacked Technique. We're going to use an IBK node, and it's an IBK color and an IBK gizmo. For the IBK gizmo, we're going to plug our plate directly into this foreground here, and the C will go into the IBK color. In order to do the IBK stack technique, looking through the IBK color, again, we'll set the size to 1 initially, and then we're going to start messing with these values until we've brought back our background. Since I know this is a green screen, I'm going to go ahead and bring up the greens on the dark side here, and we'll see that our whole background starts coming together. So we want the black to cover our entire character here. We don't care too much about this, wall, because we'll be manually removing it with a garbage mat, but we want to make sure that all these edges are covered by the black, and we're not eating too far away into the green screen. So we can just tweak these values, bring them down a bit, and the idea is that we're going to bring these values down until the green screen starts exploding. And when I say exploding, I mean stuff that looks like this. So if I can pull this back up a bit, and then we're going to do that for each section here. We're going to just bring this right up until the point that it starts exploding. For the blue, we'll do the exact same thing. I think these values are going to be very small. So what I've found is if we go ahead and actually increase these lights a lot to bring back our green screen, we can then bring down the darks, and that will cover our character a lot better than it was by just tweaking it a little bit. So again, it takes a lot of just trying to find that right balance where you're covering the character. But as long as your green screen is consistently lit, you should be able to get to a point where you're covering your character and not blowing up the green screen. Once you're at a place that you feel is good, we can actually go ahead and crank this patch black up really high. If we just keep scrolling upwards, we can see what it's doing. And what it's doing is it's basically removing our character and just giving us a full image of our green screen, which is exactly what we wanted. So at the end of the day, what we're trying to do here is create a clean plate. This is something like if you were to use Adobe Photoshop, you use generative fill to remove the character. We're doing this with math, and the goal here is to create a perfect whole of just the character, though. We don't want to be creating a generative fill area where there are slight discrepancies between the generative fills edge and our actual green screen edge, and this is perfect. Now I'm going to quickly show you what we want to avoid and what we want to end up with. This is obviously a very extreme example, but what you'll likely find is you have just a few pixels on the edge here, and when you create your clean plate, those are going to get stretched and warped, and they're going to fill your entire image. I'm going to set this to a very high number, like 250. And you can see as we go into the center of our screen, we can see that there are these dark spots. But if we did the same thing with our full coverage image and set this to, again, 250, we'll notice it looks much more stable than our other version. But if for whatever reason you just can't tweak your values enough to cover this area here, that's where the erode option comes in. We can increase this erode until it covers the full helmet, for example. So the helmet isn't being stretched and warped in. You can see we have these values right here that would need to be covered a bit. And it's fine to increase this erode node, but it's worth noting that the less accurate to the perfect edge this IBK color node is, the less accurate your edges will be. That's not to say that it would be more accurate if you just did your core key, but it is saying that you can bring back a lot of detail with this technique, so you want to make it as perfect as possible. So now that I've got this set up though, I can actually start working on the IBK Stacked Technique. So I'm going to delete the bad version and we're going to start working on this one. Keep this size at 1 here, then we're going to copy and paste our IBK color, and we're going to increase the patch black to 2. And actually for this first node here, I'm going to set it to 1. Starting at 2, and then 4, and then 8. And we're just going to keep multiplying it by its value, so 16. And we're going to go all the way until we've fully covered our screen. 32. We're getting closer here. 64. And we're really close. And I think if we just copy and paste this 64 here, we have a pretty good IBK fill. So if I look through this IBK gizmo now, we'll see it's looking a bit weird. Again, it thinks that the screen type is blue. We need to set this over to green, and there we go. We have a key. If we hit A on our keyboard, we can see our alpha, and we can see that our alpha is transparent. And it's not as smooth as our main key light one was. It's not as sharp on the edges, but it has more edge detail here, and that is what we are looking for with an edge key. Something you can do to help yourself a little bit with the edge key is you can check this luminance match option. Sometimes it helps you, and then you can play with the range a bit and it will bring some stuff back in. Sometimes it doesn't though, so use it at your own risk. So with this IBK Stacked Technique set up, we have finished our edge key. Select everything, you know the drill. Type in backdrop, we'll call it edge key, and we are ready to combine both our core key and edge key together. Drop down a merge node here, and we'll do A, screening onto B. We're doing screen because that will keep us from getting the values above 1, and if we look through this, we'll notice we're getting the best of both worlds. We're getting these nice edges on our edge key, but we're also getting the solid core in the center of our core key, leading to the best type of matte you can get. Now finally, what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the outside area from our range. I'm going to drop down a roto node, and we're just going to do a quick garbage matte around a character. Now you can do this whenever, really, and once we've done that, we can just set merge. A is a mask of B, so something like this. And now once we've screened those together and added in our garbage matte, if we look at it, we can see we have our final matte with the final alpha. Now there's just a tiny bit of cleanup that we still want to do, and I think this is a good time for us to revisit our denoise a little bit. If we zoom in here, because I think if we look at it wide, you won't even be able to see it on YouTube, but if we zoom in, we can see that we're getting quite a bit of noise still on our alpha channel. And our flap here is getting just a bit too distorted for my liking with our current denoise. Back over at the beginning of our pipeline, if we hit tab and type in denoise, we're going to notice that I have a couple options, and I'm going to go over my favorites. My favorite, first and foremost, of course, is the Reduce Noise node. This is by Neat Video. It is the best denoiser I've seen in Nuke so far. The first one is the one we've been using, which is this denoise node here. And the second one is Denoise Filter. And while these look like they have super similar options, they do work slightly differently. I'm going to replace this denoise node with the Denoise Filter node. And we'll see we have a little box again that we can place to analyze our noise. Placing it somewhere on the green screen, we're going to go over to the noise analysis option and click analyze noise, and we should be done. If we look back at our mask, we're going to see that there is still a bit of noise there, but it is better. Finally, the last bit of cleanup we can do to help this noise even further is drop down a clamp node. So what we're going to want to do with this clamp node is we're going to want to increase our gamma all the way to the top so we can really see all this noise that we want to remove. And we're going to go ahead and check enable on both min clamp 2 and max clamp 2, and we're just going to take our minimum and we're going to increase it until this noise disappears. We don't want to increase it too much because we don't want to start eating into our mask. We just want to increase it a little bit. Reset our gamma again. We can see we didn't really mess with our mask. We just removed that extra noise. So let's now actually turn this key into something we can put over the background. So I'm going to add a copy node right here. And we're going to copy the alpha channel from the masks that we've created. So copy A onto our Despill, which will be B. And if we look through this node, we can see that we are looking at our despilled image, but if we hit A, we see we have the alpha from our keys. Simply drop in a pre-mult now in order to pre-multiply your image, and you get your final result. This is the final key, and this is going to be what we're actually putting over our background. As a temporary measure, just to see how it looks, we can put our background over our footage now. So I'm going to do a reformat node here and put this over our footage. So I'm just going to bring this down here, merge, and then it's going to be our character over our background. So that's A over B. If I look through our node now, we see we have something that actually looks like it's coming together. We get the mountain through the reflection of the mud flap, and our key looks pretty dang sharp if I do say so myself. Our character is a lot more contrasty than this background, so we need to do our best to try and match the color space of our mountain background and our cave here to our character. I'm going to hit G on my keyboard to create a grade node, and while I'm still looking through my merge, I'm going to hover over my viewport and hit R on my keyboard to switch to the red channel. We're going to start by changing the gamma by hitting this little pinwheel icon here, and we're going to mess with the red channels until we feel like the midtones, which is our gamma, line up a bit with our character more. I think if we pull it down to make them a little bit darker, that might sit a little bit better. So I'm pretty happy with that. But I think our white points are a lot hotter. So let's hit the pinwheel here, and we'll play with these a little bit more. So I'm going to go ahead and increase this until we get a true white up on the top here. And hovering over the top of our helmet, we'll see we're getting about 1.2. So I think the background should probably be matched to that. And control and click on the red, and I'm going to pull this down until we get a little bit closer to 1.2. So that's going to be around 0.46, and we'll end up with an image like this. And messing with our gamma a bit further, maybe pulling it down a bit more. Look at the black points again. Maybe we want to actually decrease these or increase them accordingly. I think actually having it be 0 for now is just fine, and we can switch over to the green channel. That's a lot less contrasty than our original image. So I'm going to go ahead and drop the gamma down. Then I might even lower our black point a little bit farther. Now I'm going to end up basically doing the exact same process for all 3 of these channels, just trying to match them as best as I can. I really think we're going to always be increasing this white point and then messing with the gamma to try and get everything to match. But as we see, that feels like it's already sitting a lot better. And we're just going to do this for the blue channel as well. Hitting B on our keyboard to go into the blue channel, we'll do the exact same thing. This one, again, a bit darker. Pull down that white point until it's really bright, and then maybe play with our black point if we need to. It's a lot of trial and error here, but if we see, we go back into our color channel now, this looks like it's sitting a whole lot better than our original image. Finally, of course, we're going to want to drop down a defocus node in order to throw the background out of focus a bit. So I'm going to go ahead and increase this to, I don't know, something like, let's say, I think 12 looks pretty aesthetic, so we'll use something like that. Now, if there's any additional color correction you want to do, I would do it after you've combined these 2 passes. So I'm going to go ahead and drag this stat out here just to get some straight lines again. And let's say I'm going to drop down a C for a color correct node. We'll increase the contrast a little bit more. Maybe I'll want to push the shadows more into the blues just to get that cinematic look. And then we can push the midtones and the highlights a little bit more orange, something like this. And that's looking pretty cool. It's definitely way too blown out though. To bring the gain down a bit. I wanted to warm the shot up a little bit more, something like this. I do think this does look pretty cool. That might be a little too warm if I'm honest. It definitely works. We have this bright light behind our helmet, and it's even being blown out on the helmet itself. However, there's not a lot of actual light wrap happening on this edge. Pressing tab on my keyboard, I'm going to type in light wrap, and we're going to see we get tons of options. Again, this is part of the Nuke Survival Toolkit. Personally, I'm a big fan of the light wrap Pro filter, so I'm going to go ahead and drop this in here. By default, it's going to plug into our foreground, and then we're going to drop down a dot here, and we're going to plug this in to our background. It's always worth pointing out that LightWrap is not a substitution for good color correction. If you're going to do a crappy color correction and just try to fix it with LightWrap, that's not going to work. Like, doing something like this is generally not okay. You don't want to hit it this hard. You'll get that Spy Kids 3 kind of aesthetic, and we really don't want that. So we want to make sure that we're dialing in our LightWrap to help, but not overpower our image. So something small like this, maybe even a little bit smaller. I'm fine with upping the LightWrap on the highlights, but I think this is probably good. Just something very minor that'll help our image sit in. Something you'll notice as we zoom in though is we get this white edge on our character, and this is because of our Despill. Remember how I said we were going to come back to this Despill later? Well, now is the time. Probably going to want to actually set my screen target color now to our final background. Look through our background node with the Despill to color node open. I can check my eyedropper. I'm going to pick a color here. So I'm going to do Control, Shift, and drag. We're just going to get a general area of this color. Looking through this now, we'll see the changes if we just undo them and redo them. We're getting a little bit more of that blue color onto our edge here, but it's still like too bright. We got this bright edge here that doesn't really look right. So how can we fix this? So if we look at the luminance value of this background at the moment after we finish our Despill, we're going to see that the luminance value is about 0.024. Looking at our background here, if we do the same thing, our luminance value is about 0.012. So our goal right now is going to get this background's luminance to be 0.12. But we can do this with this luminance matcher that we set up. Going into the grade, I'm just going to pull down the multiply until hopefully we get to a value around 0.12. So going all the way down to 0, which is the same thing as not doing any luminance at all, is actually just about perfect for us in this scenario. I think in the Despill to color node, we might even want to pull this down a bit. You can see how quickly it drops when you pull it down, but just a tiny bit to get down to 0.121. That's really close, I'd say, to this, which is 0.120. And this should look a lot better on those edges, and you can see that white edge has disappeared. Now there's one more thing I said we would do, and that's going to be using an Additive Keyer to bring back some details. Might not even be necessary, but I want to show you how to set one up anyway. Let's add an Additive Keyer node, drop it in here, and we're going to need to plug a couple different inputs here. We're going to need a clean plate, and we're going to need our foreground. Our clean plate is going to be the output of this IBK color node, and then our foreground, of course, is going to be the output of our LightWrap. And now there's one more pipe we need to hook up in order for this to work, and that's going to be the mask pipe, which of course is our alpha. So I'm going to plug this into this copy channel here. Actually, you know what? I'm going to plug it into this clamp right here. Now, if we look at our A over B again, and I disable and re-enable this, we'll see there are some changes happening here. Some are good, some are bad. So the first good change is this area of our helmet, which was somewhat transparent, is no longer transparent. I'm a big fan of that. However, our edge is getting a lot darker over here, and I'm not so much a fan of that one. We're going to take the dark value option, and we're just going to drop it right until we no longer have that bright edge. Now for this shot, we ended up not using our luminance matcher, but let me give you an example of when you would use it. If I drop down another grade node here, and I multiply the background by something like crazy large, like let's say 3. If we looked at our edges, we'd see that they're actually pretty dark, and we're getting these black, awful edges on the edge of our mat. Using our luminance matcher, we re-enable this, and now we can use this grade node to increase the luminance of our edges. So if I brought this up, I'd say to around, 2 value, we no longer have that black edge. So that is the use case for a luminance matcher. So that is the whole purpose of the luminance matcher. Obviously, we didn't need it for the color correction that we set up for the shot, but it is always there for you to use if you need to. Now, I've set a LUT up for myself in that raw color space that we read in initially, so I need to go ahead and undo my color space transformation that I did over here. So I'm just going to copy this color space node, and I'm going to paste it in the bottom of my stack. Click swap input output, and that's going to reverse that transformation. I'm then going to convert this over to an sRGB color space like this. And then finally, I'm going to drop down an OCIO file transform and read in a LUT that I created for this shot. I need to set this over to sRGB. I think it's a little underexposed, so I'm just going to multiply this up to get it a bit more exposure. And I think that looks pretty dang good. Anyway, guys, I know this has been a longer lesson than the previous ones, but hopefully you got some useful information. So once again, I want to make a major shout out to Tony Lyons. He's actually the person who put together the Nuke Survival Toolkit. This is an amazing toolkit. There actually is a keying template in here. Remember how at the beginning of the video I talked about overly complex templates? Well, this is one of them. This is like a version of my keying script on steroids. He has a whole series on how to use it though. I'll link it down in the description if you want to really take your stuff to the next level. But hopefully my method is good enough for most of you. If this video helped you out, go ahead and leave a thumbs up. And if you want to see more content like this, of course, make sure to subscribe. We're so close to 2,000 subscribers. It is truly awesome. Either way, I've been Alex from Level Up Plus VFX, and I'll see you in the next one.